Learning and teaching is basically about affording change, so it is really the method we have to help people change their lives in some way, whether that is learning something new at that level or thinking differently, learning how to think differently, and to it's the way we progress. If we're not learning anything, what are we doing? You know, we're natural learners, and so to enhance that and to keep that going throughout your life is really, we're always learning. You have to always be learning something. The learning outcomes that I'm looking for in a formal sense would be for my students to be able to integrate technology into their classroom in a meaningful way and an effective way. So rather than when computers first started coming into schools, in my experience, we're going to type up our essays in Word, so therefore we're doing ICT in education. Now that my aim is that they understand why you're using technology first, then what's the best way of using that. I look at my learning teaching project as my work as a whole. My work is my project, if you like, and really what I like to do is think of the best way that we can teach whoever it is that needs to or wants to learn. So my project is to find the best ways of doing that. Now, luckily I work in the area of ICT, and I have the opportunity to look at all those sorts of tools in that way, that how do I use these to help people learn. More and more, I guess, I'm asking my students in my courses to interact with each other, and that has its pros and cons. Some really love to do that. The more extroverted people love their social media, and some like to lurk, and they'll say, is it okay if I just lurk here? And I'll say, you can lurk as long as you like. The other thing I'm getting learners to do is more and more over time is to think about e-portfolios and reflective learning, so that they're collecting not only artefacts but writing about their experiences and their thoughts, and that's part of the forum posting, is to have them reflect on their own thinking and others, but also to collect that thinking in a portfolio of some sort. And so that's more and more over time appealing to me as a teacher, because I see the benefits to the students' learning. And even though they're often reluctant and they don't like to talk about themselves like that, or they're having trouble with the technology at the start, it's worth persevering, and at the end they always say, yeah, look, that was driving me nuts at first, but gee, it was useful. Gee, that was a useful thing to do, and I'll use that with my students. And that's, for me, often a sign of success when they go, oh, I'm going to use this in my classes. Okay, yes. One of the things I focus on the most in my subjects is probably a social constructivist sort of approach, where the ability of computers to let students interact with each other, particularly distant students, which is what I've mainly got, means that we can learn together in different ways, and whether that's synchronous in something like Wimba or asynchronously in groups or discussion groups or what have you, that seems to be the most, for me, the most powerful kind of underpinning concept, if you like, that I try and structure my subjects around. Pedagogically, the ability to have students interact with each other and learn from each other, and that's usually a scaffolded process, because distant students are often very used to working independently and on their own, and what do you mean I've got to work in a group, and what if they don't answer, and all these sorts of things you've got to sort of nut out. Once you get the group going and the ball rolling, there's some fabulous friendships that you see. Going back to what I was saying earlier about discussion, the discussion forums are actually quite powerful if you get them going, and students really, once they get going, students really enjoy them and get quite, they're in their all times of the day and night, and that's actually really important. It's very text-based, and some students you never see in there, and they say, well, I read everything, but they weren't posters, and so those students are the ones that I'm looking at finding other ways to encourage. Some of what I do, particularly in the subject Introduction to Educational Technology, is they have to do assignments on a Web2 tool that suits their key learning area. The benefit for me in that is I get introduced to all sorts of fabulous things that some I've never heard of. So things like, I'm particularly interested in, why I'm interested in Interact 2 is replicating the social media format a la Facebook and the like, because people really enjoy that. I'd like to start using more video-like things with students, but that's a big ask, and there's privacy issues around that and equipment and those sorts of things. But Wimber for now will do that, and Wimber lets people, some people love the video cam and they put it straight on there and you can see them. Some people would rather, do anything other than put themselves on a camera. But again, Wimber touches on several sort of ways of working, which is what's really powerful about that. I mainly teach distance, so my personal learning space is wherever I'm standing at the time, because I use my phone an awful lot with my students, and the number of student emails I've dealt with standing in queues at some boring place is, I hope my students are suitably impressed by my dedication that I'm emailing them on my phone all the time. But so my learning space is anywhere, and then there's pros and cons to that, of course. I think I'd like to go home on a weekend and have my house not my learning space, but it is. In terms of students, when I ask them where they are learning, it's usually in their house, sometimes it's at work, and that's one of the really fascinating areas to explore, I think, in terms of what that idea of where you learn. And I noticed there was, now what was the university? There was a university, I think it might have been the Open University, advertising themselves as, there was someone coming home from work and plonking on the couch to go to class. It's a lovely idea, particularly for students, that they can learn when and where they are. Now, that freaks some teachers out. Well, if you put stuff online, they won't come to class. Well, if they don't have to come to class, why make them? Why do that driving all that way and all the rest of it? If they can learn wherever they like, why not cater to that? If they can't make a lecture that day, well, let's put it online in a format that's useful, not just a bunch of PowerPoint slides, so that they can access it when and where it suits them, not me. If they prefer face-to-face, then they'll make the effort and they'll come. If they can't make it, or they prefer to learn on their own at night time because they've got a house full of children or what have you, we need to cater to their learning needs, not my need to make my life simple. There's a balancing act in there, but basically, in terms of learning and teaching, that's the idea. Digital literacies is a really vexed sort of area, because it's one of those areas in this field where people take a lot for granted, and there's a lot of assumptions made, and my students come in with a lot of assumptions, and I think, where on earth did you get that idea from? I still get students distance students are often older, and I get a group who, taking my subjects, ICT and education, who are terrified. I can use Word, but that's it, and I'm not sure what to do. They often come with ideas about Facebook and all that's evil, and there's from the news and all those sorts of things. They come with all sorts of assumptions. They come with all sorts of ideas about copyright and cyberbullying and cyber safety and all sorts of weird and wonderful ideas. So you've really got to be careful about assuming they know those sorts of things. And it's very common, of course, with our younger students, fresh out of high school students, that they know about computers and they know how to use this stuff and they know how to manage all their online lives, and that's a very dangerous assumption to make as well. I'm lucky in my subjects that I teach that. We look at that specifically. Digital citizenship, what does that mean? What is that? Cyberbullying, cyber safety, online etiquette, those sorts of things. We can talk about those specifically, so I'm lucky in that sense that we can have those discussions, and that's why I've figured out what all their assumptions are, because I ask them what they are. I've been working in this area before the internet, and I cannot possibly imagine what life was like before the internet. So along the way I have learnt really that the key aspect is humanity and our humanness and meeting human needs. One, just to learn, that we love to learn things, and we need to create the environment where people love to learn. my learning philosophy is that learning is hard fun. It's got to be challenging, but it's got to be fun as well. And people will do enormously difficult things if they're fun to do. They won't do something hard if it's boring or not useful or they're not learning anything or what have you. So that's really key. The key is meeting the human need to learn, to connect, to interact with each other and to share that experience. And so technology has to meet that need, and that's what technology is for, is to help enhance the good aspects of our humanity. The next thing I want to explore is the use of online concept mapping tools for that, so that they're, rather than posting their thoughts and ideas, they can work on a project in a different form, a visual form. I'm particularly interested in visual research methodologies, so I'm trying to always think of ways that are a bit more visual. Some of the students I have, or a key group of students I have, are the TAS students, Technology Applied Studies. They're very hands-on, very visual. They want to do and make. They're not so into the talking, and talking online is typing often. That's why Wimber's been fabulous for that. So more visual ways of interacting. And the other nice thing about Wimber is that they can speak, or they can talk, or they can draw pictures on the whiteboard. So that's another way that I'm trying to encourage all those students to interact with each other in a way that they're comfortable with.